My name is Josie Carmichael. I'm 29 years old. For most of my life, my family treated me like the help, while my brother Cameron collected culinary school diplomas and restaurant management certifications. They called me the server, never the chef, paid me minimum wage while he pulled six figures, and acted like I was doing them a favor by existing. But on the night of Cameron's James Beard Award nomination dinner, in front of 250 of Chicago's most influential food critics and investors, a lawyer walked up to my table and handed me a sealed envelope that would expose the biggest lie my family ever told. What they didn't know? Nona had been keeping score. She saw everything, and she left me something that would turn the entire Carmichael restaurant dynasty upside down. The Carmichaels weren't just restaurant owners. We were Chicago food royalty, the kind of family whose name appeared in Michelin guides and food and wine features. My father, Vincent Carmichael, ran Carmichael Hospitality Group, a collection of 8 high-end restaurants across the city that my grandmother, Lucia Carmichael, had built from a single Italian deli in Little Italy back in 1972. By 2024, the group was valued at $78 million. I was born with what doctors called a sensory processing disorder. Sounds that didn't bother other people. Overhead lights in restaurants, the clatter of dishes, the hiss of steam from espresso machines, they felt like knives scraping against my brain. The fluorescent lights in grocery stores made me dizzy. The sound of the KitchenAid mixer running felt like a drill boring into my skull. Birthday parties at restaurants were my personal hell. All those overlapping conversations, the crash of plates, the birthday song echoing off tile walls. My parents' response wasn't accommodation. It was embarrassment. I remember being 7 years old, covering my ears at one of Dad's restaurant openings. The noise, the chaos, the kitchen brigade shouting, "Yes, chef," over and over. It was too much. I started crying, couldn't stop, and my mother dragged me outside into the alley behind the restaurant. "You're making a scene," she hissed, mascara running from her own frustrated tears. "Your father's investors are in there. Can't you just be normal for one night?" I couldn't. I tried. God knows I tried. But my brain wasn't wired for normal. It was wired for intensity. Everything felt louder, brighter, sharper than it seemed to for everyone else. When I was 8, they took me to specialist after specialist, neurologists, occupational therapists, a psychiatrist who prescribed medications that made me feel like I was underwater. Nothing fixed me because I wasn't broken. I was just different. But different, in the Carmichael family, meant defective. When I was 11, they enrolled Cameron in Le Cordon Bleu's summer youth program, $3,000 for 2 weeks. I remember watching them pack his bags, all excited talking about investing in his future and nurturing his natural talent. That same week, I asked if I could take a cooking class too, something quieter, maybe baking. I'd been watching the Great British Bake Off, loved how calm it was, how methodical. My mother, Patricia, just laughed, not a kind laugh, a dismissive one. "Josie, honey, you can barely handle the dishwasher noise at home. How would you survive a professional kitchen?" I was 11. I believed her. I believed that my sensitivity was a weakness, that my need for quiet spaces meant I was fragile, that the way I experienced the world meant I didn't belong in the family business. So I stopped asking for things. Stopped expecting them to see me as anything other than the daughter who couldn't handle what everyone else could. So I learned to adapt on my own. I wore noise-canceling headphones whenever I could, the big over-ear kind that made me look like I was constantly listening to music. I developed systems, visual cues for recipes written on index cards with colored markers, timers with vibrating alerts instead of beeps, techniques that let me cook in silence. I learned to read recipes by taking photos and zooming in, making the text large enough that my eyes didn't strain. And every Saturday morning, without fail, rain or shine, I'd take the L to my Nonna Lucia's brick house in Taylor Street. The train ride itself was an exercise in endurance. All those sounds, all those people. But it was worth it, because Nonna's kitchen, Nana's kitchen was my sanctuary. She'd be waiting for me on the front porch, flour already dusting her apron, hair pulled back in that silver bun. "There's my Giuseppina," she'd say, pulling me into a hug that smelled like olive oil and fresh basil. Her kitchen was quiet. No television blaring, no phone ringing, just Frank Sinatra on vinyl, playing so softly it was almost a whisper. The windows would be open, letting in the sounds of the neighborhood. Kids playing stickball in the street, Mrs. Rossetti watering her garden next door, the distant rumble of the L train. "Today," Nonna would announce, "we make cavatelli." And we would, for hours. Just the two of us, hands moving in rhythm, forming each piece of pasta by hand. She taught me to feel the dough, to know by touch when it needed more flour, more water, more kneading. She taught me that cooking wasn't about recipes written on paper, it was about listening to the sizzle of garlic in oil, telling you when it's golden, not burned, to the bubble of sauce, telling you when it's ready, to the feel of pasta dough, telling you everything you need to know. "Giuseppina," she'd say, using my full Italian name, her flour-dusted hands covering mine as we kneaded dough together. "You feel the food differently than others. That's not a problem, Tesoro. That's a gift." I remember being 12, maybe 13, and finally asking her what she meant. We were making her red sauce, the one that would simmer for hours, and I was crying because I'd put too much salt in and thought I'd ruined it. She tasted it, considered, then added a whole peeled potato to the pot. "The potato will absorb the extra salt," she explained. "But Giuseppina, you knew it was too salty before anyone else would have. You tasted it immediately. That sensitivity you have, the one your parents call a disorder, in a kitchen, that's called talent." She pulled the potato out 30 minutes later, tasted again, smiled. "Perfect, you see? You didn't ruin it. You caught it. Because you pay attention in ways others don't." Those Saturdays saved me. They were proof that I wasn't broken, that the way I experienced the world, all that overwhelming input could be channeled into something beautiful. But I didn't understand the full scope of what she was teaching me. Not then. I thought we were just cooking. I didn't realize she was training me, preparing me, showing me that I had everything I needed to not just survive in this business, but to transform it. Thanksgiving, 2018. 32 relatives crammed into my parents' Streeterville penthouse. Crystal wine glasses, catered appetizers, the annual showcase of Carmichael family excellence. My father stood at the head of the dining table, champagne flute raised. "I have an announcement," he said, his voice carrying that chef's authority he wore like armor. "Cameron has been accepted into the Institute of Culinary Education's Advanced Sommelier program in New York. Full sponsorship from the hospitality group." Applause. Cheers. Cameron grinned with practiced humility. "My son," Vincent continued, beaming, "will be the first Carmichael to earn a Master Sommelier certification in our family's history. He's going to elevate our wine program to world-class status." More applause. Uncle Marco slapped Cameron on the back. Aunt Francesca actually teared up. Then my father's gaze drifted down the table, to me. "And Josie," he paused, the warmth in his voice evaporating like steam. "Well, Josie is still figuring things out." A few cousins chuckled, soft, uncomfortable laughs, the kind people make when they witness something cruel but don't want to acknowledge it. Cameron didn't defend me. He just raised his glass higher. I stared at my untouched plate. The roasted turkey blurred through tears I refused to let fall. Under the table, a hand found mine, weathered fingers warm from kneading dough that morning. Nonna Lucia, seated to my left, squeezed gently. When I looked up, her dark eyes held something fierce, something that looked like fury directed at her own son. She didn't say anything. Not then. But 2 weeks later, she called me to her house, said she needed to teach me something important about her red sauce recipe. I didn't know it at the time, but that Thanksgiving dinner, that moment of casual cruelty in front of 30 witnesses, had set something in motion, something that would take 6 years to detonate. After dropping out of community college in 2020, I couldn't handle the fluorescent lights and constant noise of lecture halls. I needed a job. I needed purpose. I applied for a position at one of our family restaurants. I wanted to prove I could contribute, that the family business could be my path too, that maybe they'd been wrong about me. My father agreed to hire me as a server at Lucia's, the flagship restaurant named after my grandmother. Salary, minimum wage plus tips, $2.33 an hour before tips, in Chicago in 2020. That same month, Cameron was appointed executive chef at Vincenzo's, our upscale steakhouse in River North. His salary? $240,000 plus profit sharing, plus a company car, plus entertainment expenses. That basically meant his entire social life was paid for. We both started on the same day, June 1st. I remember because it was 93 degrees and Lucia's air conditioning was broken. My first shift, 8 hours in a 100-degree dining room, I made $87 in tips. Cameron's first day, he got a welcome lunch with the management team at Gibson's, steaks and champagne on the company card, the crash of dishes being stacked, the constant ding of the expo bell, the shouted orders, ordering 2 carbonara, 1 bolognese, fire the risotto on 23. It was sensory hell. I'd go home every night with migraines that lasted hours. I'd sit in my dark apartment with ice packs on my head, noise-canceling headphones on, just trying to make the pain stop. But I kept going back, because I believed somewhere deep down that if I just worked hard enough, long enough, suffered enough, they'd see me. They'd see I was trying. I was never allowed in recipe development meetings, never shown a single supplier contract, never invited to the quarterly reviews where they discuss menu changes and profit margins. I was just a server, not real staff, not family, but I watched and I learned. I discovered something about myself during those long, painful shifts, something Nona had tried to tell me, but I hadn't understood. I could taste things others couldn't, the slightest over-salting in a risotto, the exact moment a cream sauce broke, whether the basil was fresh that morning or 2 days old, if the olive oil was the good stuff or the cheap blend they'd started using to cut costs. The sensory sensitivity that made restaurants overwhelming also made me hyper-aware of every flavor, every texture, every subtle shift in a dish. What felt like a curse in the dining room was a superpower in understanding food. I started keeping a notebook, nothing fancy, just a little composition book I'd tuck in my apron pocket. Every night I'd write down what I tasted that was off. Carbonara too salty, guanciale likely from the cheap supplier. Risotto grainy, not stirred enough, tiramisu soggy, lady fingers soaked too long. I never showed anyone. Who would listen to the girl who barely graduated high school? Who would take cooking notes from a server? But I kept writing, kept tasting, kept knowing that something had changed in these restaurants, that they weren't serving Nona's food anymore. They were serving a cost-optimized, profit-maximized imitation of Nona's food, and nobody seemed to notice, or maybe nobody cared, because the restaurants were still full, still profitable, still earning those glowing reviews from critics who didn't know what the food used to taste like before. Nonna Lucia had taught me this. During those Saturday mornings in her kitchen, she'd have me taste test batches of sauce, close my eyes and identify every ingredient by feel and flavor alone. "Don't think," she'd say, guiding my hand to the wooden spoon. "Feel. What does the sauce tell you?" I'd taste it, close my eyes, let the flavors separate themselves on my tongue. Tomato, obviously. San Marzano, the sweet ones. Garlic, roasted first, not raw. Basil, fresh, added in the last hour. Olive oil, the good kind, fruity. And something else. Something I can't name. She'd smile. Balsamic. 20-year-old balsamic from Modena. Just 1 tablespoon in the final 30 minutes. It adds depth, complexity. It's the secret nobody knows. "Why don't you tell anyone?" I'd ask. "Because," she'd say, her eyes twinkling, "some things are meant to be earned, not given. Your father, he wants everything written down, systematized, made into a formula he can replicate and sell. But cooking, real cooking, isn't a formula. It's a conversation between you and the food. She taught me that every ingredient had a voice, that tomatoes from different regions tasted different, behaved different. That garlic burned at exactly 320 degrees, and you had to watch it, not trust a timer. That fresh pasta needed to rest for 30 minutes after kneading, no more, no less, or it would be tough. Your father tastes food like a businessman, she told me once in 2019, just before her health started declining. We were making gnocchi, and I'd finally gotten them light enough that they practically floated in the water. He looks for what sells, what scales, what maximizes profit per plate. You taste food like an artist. You feel what's missing, what's been lost. That's rare, Tesoro. Don't ever let them make you think it's not valuable. That same day, just before I left, she'd pressed a small leather journal into my hands, worn at the edges, pages yellowed with age, the leather soft from decades of handling. "Keep this safe," she'd said, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman of 79. "Don't read it yet. When the time is right, you'll know. When your father shows you exactly who he is, when he proves that he values profit over people, you'll know what to do." Her eyes held mine, dark and fierce. "I built something beautiful, Giuseppina. Your father turned it into a business. Profitable, yes. Successful, yes, but soulless. When the time comes, I need you to bring the soul back. Can you do that for me?" I didn't understand. Not really. I was 24, working as a server for minimum wage, believing I'd never amount to anything in this family. How could I possibly bring the soul back to an empire I wasn't even allowed to participate in? But I nodded, made a promise I didn't know how to keep. "Yes, Nonna, I promise." She smiled, kissed both my cheeks. "Good girl, now go. And remember, Giuseppina, you are exactly who you're supposed to be. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I'd taken the journal home, tucked it in my nightstand, and tried to forget the strange weight of her words. March, 2019. Nonna's brick house on Taylor Street. She was 79 then, her once strong frame grown thin, her silver hair pulled back in the same bun she'd worn my entire life. But her eyes, those knowing midnight eyes, hadn't dimmed at all. "Sit, Tesoro," she said. I sat across from her at the kitchen table where I'd learned to make everything from scratch. The walls were covered with photographs. Lucia, opening her first deli in 1972. Lucia shaking hands with Mayor Daley. Lucia accepting a James Beard Legacy Award in 1995. Not a single photo of Vincent as CEO. "I built this business from nothing," she said, her voice carrying decades of steel. "One deli, one cash register, 50 years of work. Your father—" She paused and something bitter flickered across her face. "Your father inherited it. He didn't build it. He doesn't understand what it means to create something with your hands. Nonna, he judges people by their credentials, their degrees, their ability to perform in boardrooms." She leaned forward. "I judge people by how they treat food with respect. And you, Giuseppina, you're the only one in this family who knows how to listen to what food needs." She pressed the leather journal into my hands again, more firmly this time. "There's a recipe inside, my real recipe, not the one your father uses in the restaurants, the real one." Her grip tightened. "When the time comes, when he shows you exactly who he is, you'll know what to do with it." I wanted to ask what she meant, what was so special about this recipe, why she'd chosen me. But she changed the subject, started talking about the weather, her tomato garden, the old neighborhood. 14 months later, she was gone. Heart attack. Quick. I held her hand in the hospice, one of only 3 family members at her bedside. Cameron didn't make it in time, said he was working a private event. The journal remained unopened in my nightstand. May 2024. The email arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, right before the dinner rush. Subject line, "Position restructuring, confidential." Dear Ms. Carmichael, as part of our ongoing operational optimization, your current position will be eliminated effective August 1st, 2024. Please contact HR regarding severance options. I read it 4 times. The letters swam, the fluorescent office lights making my head throb, but the message stayed the same. They were firing me. That evening, I stayed late, rolling silverware that didn't need rolling just to avoid going home. Through the thin wall separating the server station from my father's office, I heard voices. Vincent and Patricia. "We can't have her here when Cameron takes over Lucia's," my father was saying. "It looks bad, like we're running a charity." "She's been here 4 years," my mother replied. "People might ask questions." "People always ask questions. We'll say we're consolidating staff, giving opportunities to new talent. Besides," his voice dropped, but I heard it clearly. "Josie was never cut out for this business anyway. We gave her a chance, more than a chance. It's time she finds something easier. Something easier. Like I was a broken appliance they'd tried to fix and given up on." I walked out of Lucia's that night, took off my apron, and didn't look back. At home, I sat on my couch in my tiny studio apartment in Logan Square and stared at the wall, numb. That familiar numbness that came from years of being told I wasn't enough. Then I remembered. The journal. I pulled it from my nightstand, hands shaking. The leather was soft, worn smooth by decades of handling. Inside, Nana's handwriting, slanted and elegant. The first page read, "To my Giuseppina, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I'm gone, it means it's time. Time for you to know the truth. Time for you to claim what's yours." My hands shook harder. The next 50 pages were recipes. Not just any recipes. Nana's real recipes. The sauce recipe my father had built an empire on. It was here, but different. Richer. More complex. With instructions I'd never seen. There were notes in the margins. Vincent added sugar to make it more American. I never did. The real secret is time. 3 hours minimum. Vincent does 90 minutes. Carmichael restaurants use canned tomatoes now. I only used fresh San Marzanos from Campania. Page after page of culinary secrets. The real family recipes, before they'd been optimized for profit margins. But it was the final page that made my heart stop. A photocopy of a legal document, dated March 15th, 2019, 1 month before Nona died. Last will and testament of Lucia Maria Carmichael. I scanned the dense legal language, my sensory processing issues making the letters jump and rearrange, until I found the section that mattered. And to my granddaughter, Giuseppina Rose Carmichael, I leave the following: 49% ownership of Carmichael Hospitality Group, to be held in trust until such time as she demonstrates readiness to claim it. Readiness is defined as opening and successfully operating an independent restaurant for a minimum of 6 consecutive months, using the recipes contained in my personal journal, hereby bequeathed to her alongside this ownership stake. 49%. 49%. My grandmother had left me nearly half of the entire company, and nobody knew. The trust had been set up through a separate attorney, sealed until I met the condition. My phone buzzed. A text from Cameron. "Heard about the job. Probably for the best. You never really fit in anyway. No hard feelings." No hard feelings. I looked at the journal, at the recipes, at the legal document, at my entire life spent being told I wasn't good enough, and I made a decision. I was going to open a restaurant. I was going to use Nona's real recipes, and I was going to show my family exactly what they dismissed, not for revenge, for truth. June 2024. I found a tiny space in Pilsen, 800 square feet, used to be a taqueria called El Corazon, gutted to the studs, exposed brick, original tin ceiling from 1920. The rent was steep, $3,000 a month, but I had savings. 4 years of tips, living in a studio apartment with 3 roommates, eating ramen, walking everywhere instead of taking the train, saving everything. The space was perfect because it was small, intimate, manageable. I could control every aspect of it. I named it Giuseppena's, not Josie's, not some clever Italian pun, just my full name. The name Nonna always used, the name that meant I was seen. I designed the entire space around my needs, around what I'd learned about myself over 29 years of being told I was too sensitive. Soft lighting, warm Edison bulbs instead of harsh fluorescents, sound-absorbing acoustic panels on the ceiling disguised as decorative wooden slats, cork floors that muffled footsteps, an open kitchen, not because it was trendy, but because I needed to see everything, to control the chaos without being trapped in a loud, closed-off space. 12 tables, that's it. 12. I could have fit 20 in the space, probably made more money, but I wanted people to linger, to talk quietly, to experience food the way Nonna intended, as something sacred, not rushed. The kitchen equipment took everything I had saved and then some. I maxed out 2 credit cards, took a loan against my car, because I refused to cut corners. If I was going to do this, I was doing it right. A 60-quart stock pot for making sauce in big batches, a pasta sheeter, industrial but quiet. The expensive kind that doesn't scream. A deck oven that could hold 12 pizzas, but ran almost silently. Every piece of equipment chosen not just for function, but for sound. I hired 3 people, carefully, deliberately. A line cook named Marcus, who'd been fired from one of Cameron's restaurants for being too slow. He wasn't slow, he was precise. He cleaned as he went, never rushed a dish, plated everything like it was going to be photographed. Cameron called it inefficient. I called it respect for the food. A server named Tessa who was deaf and communicated in ASL. She taught me signs for every dish, every ingredient, every possible customer request. And she moved through the dining room with a grace that made everyone feel seen, cared for, important. Because she knew what it felt like to be overlooked, and a dishwasher named Miguel who was 67 and couldn't find work anywhere else because everyone wanted young, energetic staff. Miguel had worked in restaurant kitchens for 49 years. He knew more about food safety and kitchen flow than most executive chefs. He just happened to be old. We were the misfits, the rejects, the ones who didn't fit the industry mold. Perfect. I tested Nonna's recipes for 6 weeks before opening, every single one, made them over and over until I could do them in my sleep, until my hands knew the movements without thinking. Her red sauce, the real one, the one she'd never written down anywhere except in that leather journal. It took 4 hours, minimum, no shortcuts, no efficiency improvements. Fresh San Marzano tomatoes, the DOP ones from Italy, not the cheap imitations from California. Hand-crushed, not machine-pureed. Whole garlic cloves, slowly roasted in olive oil until they were golden and sweet. Fresh basil, added in stages, first the stems for depth, then the leaves for brightness. And in the final 30 minutes, that secret ingredient, 1 tablespoon of 20-year-old balsamic from Modena. The first time I tasted it, the real version, I cried, because it tasted like Nonna's kitchen, like Saturday mornings, like being seen and valued and loved. This was what our restaurants used to taste like, before Dad started using canned tomatoes to save money, before he cut the cooking time to 90 minutes to increase table turnover, before he replaced the aged balsamic with cheap red wine vinegar because customers can't tell the difference anyway. They could tell the difference. They just didn't know what they were missing. I soft opened in August. No press, no announcements, no grand opening party with investors and critics. Just a chalkboard sign out front that said Giuseppena's, real Italian, real food, and word of mouth. The first week, we served 40 people total, mostly neighbors. People who wandered in curious about the new place. I worked every service, cooking, expediting, sometimes even serving when Tessa needed help. I wanted to see every face, every reaction, every moment when someone tasted the food and their expression changed. The second week, 80 people. Some came back twice. A food blogger named Sarah posted about the cavatelli, said it was transportive like being at your Italian grandmother's Sunday dinner. By week 4, we had a wait list, an actual, honest-to-God wait list. People calling days in advance to reserve one of our 12 tables. Chicago food bloggers started showing up, then small-time critics. Then, in late September, a review in the Tribune, 3.5 stars. The critic, a woman named Chen who'd been reviewing Chicago restaurants for 20 years, wrote, "Giuseppe's serves the kind of Italian food we forgot existed. Not showy, not trendy, just good. The red sauce alone is worth the drive to Pilsen. It tastes like memory, like someone's closely guarded family secret." Which, perhaps it is. I framed that review, hung it by the host stand. The restaurant became something I hadn't expected. Not just a business, a community. Regulars started forming. Mr. and Mrs. Kowalski, who came every Thursday and always ordered the same thing, spaghetti pomodoro and a split tiramisu. A group of teachers from the elementary school down the street who came every Friday after work. A young couple who got engaged at table 7 and asked if they could have their wedding rehearsal dinner with us. These people didn't come for the scene or the Instagram photos or the celebrity chef. They came for the food, for the way it made them feel, for the quiet, intentional space where they could actually talk to each other without shouting over EDM music and clattering plates. This was what Nonna had built before it became an empire, before it became about quarterly earnings and expansion plans. This was food as love, as connection, as something that mattered beyond the profit margin. And then, one Tuesday night in October, Cameron walked in. He walked in with 2 colleagues from Vincenzo's, both sous chefs I recognized from family events. They didn't have a reservation, but it was a slow Tuesday, so Tessa seated them at table 9, right in my sightline from the kitchen. I watched through the window as they looked over the menu, watched Cameron's face, the subtle surprise when he saw the prices. I was charging less than our family restaurants, $16 for pasta pomodoro, $22 for the braciole, because this wasn't about maximizing profit. This was about making Nonna's food accessible. They ordered cavatelli with red sauce for Cameron, carbonara for one colleague, braciole for the other. I made every dish myself, hands shaking slightly but steady enough. I plated them the way Nonna taught me, simply, letting the food speak for itself. No microgreens, no foam, no edible flowers, just food. Tessa brought the plates out. I watched through the kitchen window, watched Cameron take the first bite of cavatelli, watched him stop, fork halfway to his mouth for the second bite, just frozen. Watched him take a second bite, slower this time, thoughtful, his brow furrowed in concentration. Watched him set down his fork and just sit there, staring at the plate. His colleagues were talking, laughing, enjoying their food, but Cameron looked like he'd seen a ghost. He stood up abruptly, pushed his chair back, headed straight for the kitchen. I met him at the door, blocking his way in. Health code. No guests in the kitchen. "Where did you get this recipe?" he demanded, voice low but intense. I wiped my hands on my apron, kept my voice calm. "Nonna gave it to me." "Bullshit. This is our family recipe. You stole it." "No, Cameron." I met his eyes, didn't look away. "This is the real family recipe. The one she created. The one your restaurants changed." His jaw clenched. "You have no right." "I have every right." I pulled the leather journal from where I kept it, tucked in a shelf by the pass, and held it up so he could see. "She left this to me. All of it. Every recipe, every secret, every technique you've spent 15 years trying to replicate and couldn't because you didn't have this." He stared at the journal like it was a grenade. "That's not... Dad said she never wrote anything down, that the recipes were all in her head." Dad lied. I opened the journal, showed him a page. Nona's handwriting, slanted and elegant, describing the exact process for making cavatelli. Measurements, timing, the specific type of flour 00 from Italy, not all-purpose, the exact amount of time to knead, the humidity level needed for the dough to rest properly. She wrote down everything, I continued, every recipe, every technique, every secret ingredient. She just never showed Dad because she knew what he'd do with it. He'd systematize it, optimize it, make it profitable instead of good. Cameron's face had gone pale. When did she give you this? 2019, March, 5 weeks before she died. His hands clenched into fists. And you've had it for 5 years? You've been sitting on this He couldn't finish. While you what? I asked quietly. While you built a career on a watered-down version of her recipes? While you won awards for food that was 70% as good as it should have been? While you convinced yourself you were carrying on her legacy? The words hung there, sharp and true. "Get out," he said, voice shaking. "Get out of my sight." "This is my restaurant, Cameron. If anyone's leaving, it's you." He left, didn't pay the check. I comped table 9 anyway. Added a note in the system. Family discount, 100%. 3 days later, I received a cease and desist letter. FedEx, signature required. From Sterling and Associates, Carmichael Hospitality Group's legal team. The expensive lawyers. The ones who handled corporate litigation. The letter was 6 pages long, full of legal language I had to read 3 times to understand. But the message was clear. I was using proprietary recipes and trade secrets belonging to Carmichael Hospitality Group. I had 30 days to cease operations or face a lawsuit for misappropriation of intellectual property, damages estimated at $500,000 or more. $500,000. I sat in my tiny office, the storage room I'd converted with a desk and a file cabinet, and just stared at the letter. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. They were going to sue me, my own family, for using recipes that Nonna had given me, for honoring her legacy the way she'd intended. I called the attorney whose name was on Nonna's will, a woman named Margaret Chen, 62, sharp as a knife, with an office in the Loop that had framed newspaper articles about her victories in corporate law. "They're threatening to sue me," I told her, voice cracking. "Good," she said calmly, like I'd just told her it was raining. "Good. They're saying I owe them $500,000. "Josie," Margaret said, her voice patient but firm, "take a breath. Listen to me very carefully. Your grandmother anticipated this. Exactly this. The moment they threaten legal action against you for using those recipes, it triggers the next phase of the trust." "What? What phase?" "The phase where we tell your family the truth. That you don't just have Nonna's recipes, you have 49% ownership of their company, and if they sue you, we'll countersue for years of wage theft. You were paid minimum wage while performing management-level analysis, discrimination based on your disability, hostile work environment, and breach of fiduciary duty." My heart was pounding. "We have evidence of all that?" "Your grandmother kept everything, Josie. Every email where they discussed your limitations. Every family dinner where they mocked you, she recorded some of them. Did you know that? Audio recordings on her phone, just in case. Every financial document showing the disparity between your pay and Cameron's despite similar hours worked. She was building a case for 5 years. Because she knew her son. She knew exactly what he would do." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "She loved you, Josie," Margaret continued, softer now. "And she protected you. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to request an emergency board meeting. We're going to present the trust documents. And we're going to watch your father's empire realize that the daughter they dismissed now holds the keys to their entire operation." "When?" I whispered. "How's next Tuesday work for you?" "September 19th, 2024. The offices of Carmichael Hospitality Group. Margaret Chen had requested an emergency board meeting. My father thought it was about the lawsuit. He showed up with Cameron and their legal team, 4 attorneys in expensive suits. I showed up in my chef's coat, still smelled like garlic and basil. "What is this?" Vincent demanded when he saw me. Margaret placed a folder on the conference table. "This is the reading of a portion of Lucia Carmichael's will. The portion that concerns ownership, stakes in this company. My father's face went pale. Mother left everything to the company. We already settled the estate. You settled the majority of the estate, Margaret corrected. But Lucia created a separate trust in March of 2019, before her death. A trust that includes a 49% ownership stake in Carmichael Hospitality Group. Silence. Pure, ringing silence. That's impossible, my father whispered. Margaret slid documents across the table. Stock certificates, trust agreements, all legally binding, all notarized. These shares were held in trust with a condition. That condition has now been met. She looked at me. Josie has successfully operated an independent restaurant for 6 consecutive months, using the original Carmichael recipes. As of today, she owns 49% of this company. Cameron's face went from confusion to rage. 6 months? She's only been open for... He stopped, counted, realized. August to now, 6 months. The soft opening counted, Margaret confirmed. Revenue records confirm continuous operation. My father stood, hands shaking. You knew about this? You've been planning this. No, I said quietly. I've been cooking, using the recipes Nona actually created, before you changed them, before you optimized them for profit, before you forgot what they were supposed to taste like. This is extortion, Cameron spat. No, Margaret interjected. This is inheritance, legal inheritance, from a woman who built this company and chose how to distribute it. You can contest it in court if you'd like, but I assure you the documentation is airtight. Vincent sank into his chair. I'd never seen him look so small. What do you want? He asked finally. You want money? We'll buy you out. I shook my head. I want a seat at the table. I want decision-making power, and I want these restaurants to go back to using Nana's real recipes. That's insane, Cameron said. Those recipes aren't scalable. They're too expensive, too time-intensive. They're what made these restaurants legendary in the first place, I interrupted. Before you cut corners, before you prioritize speed over quality, before you forgot that food is supposed to mean something. My father looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You really think you can do this? Run this company? I don't want to run it, I said. I want to save it. I slid my own folder across the table. Inside, reviews from food critics who'd visited Giuseppena's, every single one glowing. Phrases like, reminiscent of old-school Chicago Italian and the most authentic red sauce in the city, jumped out from the pages. This is what happens when you honor the food, I said, when you stop treating it like a commodity and start treating it like art, like legacy, like love. Vincent stared at the reviews. At the numbers, Giuseppena's was small, but profitable, very profitable. Higher margins than any of the Carmichael restaurants because I wasn't cutting corners. I want one thing in return, I said. I want you to try the food, the real food, the way Nona made it, Cameron scoffed. We don't have time for... Tomorrow night, I continued. At Giuseppena's, 6 o'clock. You, Cameron, Mom. Try one meal. If you still think I'm wrong, I'll sell my shares back to you. At cost. Vincent looked up sharply. You'd do that? If I'm wrong, yes. I met his eyes. But I'm not wrong. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Tomorrow. 6 o'clock. September 20th. I got to the restaurant at 9 a.m., even though we weren't opening until the family dinner at 6. I needed the time, the silence, the preparation. I prepped for 8 hours straight. Alone in my kitchen, just me and Frank Sinatra on vinyl, the same albums Nona used to play. Fresh pasta, hand-rolled cavatelli, each piece formed between my fingers and a ridged board, the way Nona taught me. 3 pounds of dough, kneaded for exactly 12 minutes, rested for exactly 30. My hands knew the movements without thinking now. Red sauce. Started at 10 a.m. for a 6 p.m. service. 8 hours would have been better, but 4 would have to do. San Marzano tomatoes, the ones that cost $4 a can instead of 99 cents. Hand-crushed, feeling each tomato break between my fingers, checking for any bad spots, any bitterness. Whole garlic cloves, 12 of them, roasted slow in olive oil until they were golden and sweet and soft enough to spread on bread. Fresh basil from my herb garden, the one I kept in containers on the restaurant's back step. 23 plants, each one carefully tended. I added the stems first for depth, tied them in bundles so I could fish them out later. The leaves would go in during the last 30 minutes, torn by hand, never cut with a knife because metal bruises them, makes them bitter. And at 2:30, exactly 90 minutes before service, I added the secret. 1 tablespoon of 20-year-old balsamic from Modena. The bottle cost $240. I'd bought it with my first paycheck from Giuseppena's, because some things are worth the investment. The sauce transformed, deepened. The balsamic didn't make it sweet, it made it complex. Layers of flavor that unfolded on your tongue. Bright tomato, rich garlic, fresh basil, and underneath it all, this deep, almost mysterious note that made you take another bite just to figure out what it was. This was Nonna's magic. This was what my father had lost. Braciole, thin sliced beef, pounded even thinner, tender enough to tear, filled with breadcrumbs, fresh parsley, pecorino romano, and pine nuts toasted until they were golden, rolled tight, tied with kitchen twine, browned in olive oil until the outside was caramelized, then nestled into the sauce to braise for 2 hours, low and slow, until the meat was so tender it fell apart at the touch of a fork. Tiramisu, made fresh that morning. Espresso-soaked ladyfingers, strong coffee sweetened with just a touch of sugar, mascarpone cream whipped with egg yolks and vanilla until it was cloud-light, layers of coffee and cream and cocoa resting in the walk-in cooler, flavors marrying together, becoming something greater than the sum of their parts. By 5:30, everything was ready. The dining room was empty, just table 4, the corner table with the best light, set for 3, white tablecloth, simple white plates, wine glasses, a bottle of Nonna's favorite Chianti, the one she'd special ordered from a vineyard in Tuscany. At 6 o'clock exactly, my family arrived. Vincent, Patricia, Cameron. They walked in together, awkward, uncomfortable, like they weren't sure whether this was a dinner or an ambush. They sat at table 4, didn't speak, just sat. I didn't come out to greet them, didn't explain the menu, didn't perform. I let the food speak, just like Nonna taught me. Tessa brought out the first course. Pasta al pomodoro. Simple, just cavatelli and that red sauce. Nothing else, no protein, no vegetables, no garnish. Just pasta and sauce, and the truth of what food could be when you cared about it. I watched from the kitchen window, couldn't help myself, watched my father pick up his fork, hesitate, look at the plate like it might bite him, watched him take the first bite, watched his eyes close, watched him set down his fork and just breathe. He took a second bite, slower this time, chewed carefully, deliberately, like he was trying to memorize every flavor. Then he set down his fork again and just sat there for a full minute, not eating, not talking, just processing. Cameron tasted his portion. I saw the exact moment it hit him, the recognition. His eyes went wide. His hand holding the fork started shaking slightly. My mother didn't say anything, just ate and cried. Quiet tears running down her face, not bothering to wipe them away. Second course, braciole. The beef so tender it dissolved on the tongue, the sauce now infused with meat drippings, even richer than before. The filling, that mixture of breadcrumbs and cheese and pine nuts, providing texture and depth. Still, no one spoke. They just ate. Really ate. Not the way you eat at business dinners or family obligations. The way you eat when food matters. When it's not just fuel, but memory, connection, love. I brought out the tiramisu myself. Set it down without a word. 3 portions plated simply, dusted with cocoa. Vincent looked up at me when I set down his plate. His eyes were red, not from allergies, from crying. This is... He couldn't finish the sentence. I waited. "This is how she made it," he finally said, voice breaking. "Exactly how she made it. I forgot. God help me, I forgot what it was supposed to taste like." He took a bite of the tiramisu, and something broke in him. I watched it happen. This man who'd spent 50 years building an empire, who'd dismissed me for 29 years, broke. "I forgot," he repeated, and this time it was barely a whisper. "I forgot what mattered." Cameron stared at his plate, silent. For once, completely silent. My mother reached across the table, took my hand. "I'm so sorry," she said, "for everything, for every time we made you feel small, for every time we didn't see you." I nodded. Couldn't speak. Vincent stood, walked into the kitchen. I followed. He looked around at my space, the sound panels, the soft lighting, the setup designed for someone who experienced the world differently. "You built this," he said. "Really built it, the way she did." "Yeah. And I told you you'd never make it in this business." "Yeah," he turned to me. "I was wrong about all of it. About you, about what matters, about—" He gestured helplessly at the restaurant. "About everything." I didn't know what to say, so I said the truth. "I don't need you to fix the past, Dad. I need you to do better going forward." He nodded. Once, sharp, like a promise. We went back to the table, sat together, the four of us, for the first time in years without tension crackling in the air. "Here's what I propose," I said. "We use the next year to transition all 8 restaurants back to Nona's original recipes, the real ones. We train staff properly. We source quality ingredients. We slow down." "That'll cut profits by 30%, Cameron said. Not argumentative, just stating facts. "Short term, yes," I agreed. "Long term? We become what we used to be, the best Italian restaurants in Chicago. Not the most profitable, the best." Vincent looked at Cameron. Something passed between them. Then Vincent looked at me. "You really think it'll work?" "I know it will, because it already is working. Here." He looked around Giuseppena's, at the full tables, even on a private night, at the wait list by the door, at the life I'd built. "Okay," he said finally. "We do it your way. 1 year. We see what happens." Cameron looked like he'd swallowed something bitter, but he nodded. 1 year. October, 2024. The transition began, slowly, carefully, 1 restaurant at a time. I moved into a bigger apartment in West Loop, 2 bedrooms, big kitchen, walking distance to Giuseppena's. The rent was more than I'd ever paid, but I could afford it now. My salary as Chief Culinary Director of Carmichael Hospitality Group, $190,000 a year, plus dividends from my shares. The title was my creation, a role that had never existed in my father's empire, someone who focused on food quality over quarterly profits. Vincent called every week now to ask my opinion, to run decisions by me, to actually listen. We both pretended the past hadn't happened. It was easier that way. But we were building something new. Patricia and I had dinner every other week. Slowly, awkwardly, she was learning to see me as a person instead of a problem. It wasn't the mother-daughter relationship I dreamed of, but it was honest, which was more than we'd ever had. Cameron and I, that was harder. He resented my authority, resented that the family failure now had the power to override his decisions. But he was learning, slowly, that there were different kinds of strength. On the wall of my apartment, I'd hung a photo of Nonna in her original deli, 1972, young, fierce, hands dusted with flour. Sometimes, when the evening light hit it just right, I could almost hear her voice. "Brava, tesoro. You did it." "You gave me the recipe, Nonna," I whispered. "I just had to be brave enough to use it." 6 months ago, I was invisible. Now I was finally fully myself. Looking back, I understand something now that I couldn't have understood at 28. My grandmother didn't leave me 49% of her company because I was better than Cameron. She left it to me because she knew I wouldn't let profit corrupt the soul of what she'd built. Sensory processing disorder isn't my flaw. It's part of who I am, like my ability to taste nuance others miss, my patience with slow processes, my understanding that some things can't be rushed. The things that made me difficult in my parents' eyes were the same things that made me see the truth when everyone else looked away. Vincent judged worth by credentials, by speed, by quarterly earnings. Lucia judged worth by respect for craft, by kindness, by the way people treated food as something sacred. And now, finally, I get to judge my own worth, not by what my parents said, not by what Cameron achieved, not by what any stranger on the internet thinks, by my own standard, my own measure, my own truth. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you've ever been the overlooked one, the dismissed one, the one they said was too sensitive or not tough enough, I want you to know something. You don't need a secret inheritance to prove your value, but you do need to give yourself permission to stop seeking approval from people who will never give it. Your differences aren't disabilities. They're your recipe, the thing that makes what you create yours. My family hurt me for 29 years, but I didn't need to hurt them back to find peace. I just needed to stop waiting for them to see me and start seeing myself. That's the real inheritance my grandmother left me, and nobody can ever take it away. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that your worth isn't determined by the people who failed to see it, I want to hear from you. Subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment telling me your story. And if you want more stories like this, stories about ordinary people who found the courage to stand up for themselves, check the link in the description. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Until next time.